What do we as players want to see and experience in a side quest? That is the question. In other words, what makes a great side quest? I've been ruminating on this question all week, and the games that pop into my head are 1. Mass Effect, 2. Elden Ring, 3. Cyberpunk 2077, and 4. The Witcher 3. In my head, these are the RPGs that nail the art of the side quest.
I kind of like how you are slowly becoming the Yetti Den's Jeff Goldblum. Like your voiceovers are slowly getting more and more Jeff Goldblum as we go, and I think that's a great direction. So when you brought up the topic of side quests, I think last week, it made me curious to see how Bethesda talks about their design language. And so I listened to some developer interviews that explain how the development teams at Bethesda approach their process of quest design.
I got a question for you. Which Skyrim side quests come to mind when you think back on your time in Tamriel?
Yeah, so I've been replaying Skyrim on Series X and trying to prioritize side quests and faction side quests because when I was a young gamer, I was just like, I want to see the story. I don't want spoilers. I want to race to the end. So when my friends talk about stuff, I know what happened. And like now I'm going, okay, I want to do all of the stuff I've missed over the years. And so Waking Nightmare is a quest that I really recommend. It was one that I found recently. And you meet a companion that you can, after the quest, bring along with you. And we were joking, is his name Erandur or Erandur? And Erandur is great. So I highly recommend that quest. Another just hilarious small quest that I recommend you play if you can find it is Delayed Burial, where you resolve a conflict with a jester named Cicero, and he is classic Elder Scrolls comedic relief, like totally out there zany, great side quests. But I want to know from your experience, how has your expectation of side quest design evolved over time as you've played more than just Bethesda RPGs? You go out there and you taste the finer wines of modern RPGs, the evolution. And I'm kind of more of a retro guy.
Quests. So many.
What are some of these side quests that come to mind? You know, you at the top, you mentioned a few of those games. Like, how has it evolved? Like, how is it getting better or more interesting?
Right. When I was a kid, you know, it was really kind of light on the narrative, and the side quest was very much just fetch quests. And there became this meme over time of like, oh, here's another side quest, and it's always just a fetch quest. We're sick and tired of it. And I think the developers heard that and felt that themselves too because a lot of developers do come from a history of playing video games, and so I'm happy they latched onto that pain and understood it, because now we've had plenty of really great side quests in the last 10 years. I'm expecting some consequences in my side quests too. Like, are they going to affect the narrative, the overarching narrative too? And then finally, everybody loves loot. And so that payoff in the end, that reward for doing the side quest, even is that cherry on top for me. And so really a good side quest and how it's developed over time for me is depth. It adds depth to the game instead of it being this a more shallow approach of just here's the main quest. I'm diving deeper into the world. I'm learning more about the characters, and I'm also getting more loot that also has lore and maybe a story with it as well. So Spencer, let's talk about Starfield real quick. How do you think Bethesda has handled their side quests?
Yeah, you know, like when I first started Starfield, I was extremely skeptical with how they were going to handle side quests because I was struggling with the main quest at the beginning, and the main quest by no means is my favorite element of Starfield. And as I played more, like purely from a level design standpoint, I think they've done a great job with side quests. I think players want more Starfield. I think players want Starfield to focus more on narrative and character, and I think they tried to address that in the DLC, and I think they're still missing strong characters, but they have Andreja, who's a great character, and I think her side quest called Divided Loyalties is a great one because it explores in the base game a little bit more about who she is, and then ultimately you learn even more in the DLC. But I think that when you have good characters, you can write good side quests. And if you don't have those good characters, you could maybe make up with it with strong dungeons and level design and environmental storytelling. And I think that's what Starfield does do really well. And so I've now been working my way up to the final encounter in the main story by doing as many side quests as I can. And that's been fun because it's like every day there's a little treat of like, oh, I'm going to go drop off this thing and maybe I'll get into a shootout, or, oh, I'm going to go discover like these new guns, or I'm going to get more ingredients to increase my character skills, and maybe I'll be able to mod more weapons and more gear. So not having that pressure to do it all at once, do it really quick, spreading it out over time, I think helps Starfield a lot. And a great foil to Starfield is the Outer Worlds because there's less content. And so you can do like almost all of the side quests before moving on to the next stage of the story. And I think that is a huge advantage that the Outer Worlds has over Starfield. Starfield may have these massive dungeons and battles all hidden behind one little prompt, you know, and you may never do it and just get a bad run of boring quests when there was this really epic quest that you just didn't get a chance to get to. Whereas with the Outer Worlds, it's easier to see everything because of the size and the scope. And I kind of am getting that from my little time I've spent, probably like 10 to 20 hours with Mass Effect 1, where it feels a little bit more manageable. And so the quality bar of the narrative and the characters and the lore and the factions is raised because it's not this like massive sandbox that you're exploring. So let's talk about padding. You mentioned it. Fetch quests is what I consider padding, which is like, you know, let's get as many hours in here because gamers are paying $70 for the game, right? There's nothing worse than a side quest that was designed purely to pad out the game's content offerings. So have you ever played RPGs recently where you felt personally offended by a side quest fetch quest design?
Well, I think it's really easy to get personally offended now, especially post all of the fetch quests we played when we were kids, because it's so easy to play a game where you're like, now I'm not expecting fetch quests. I've seen good side quests. And so when a new game comes out and has fetch quests, you're like, oh my gosh, they took the easy way out. And so a game or a series that I'm thinking about, I'm sorry guys, I have to say it if you're a huge fan. I was a fan too originally, but Assassin's Creed with the new titles, this game is just obese. Like it's just filled to the max with content. And a lot of it is just not fun because you're getting sent on these fetch quests. I gotta get these materials, bring them to this guy, then this guy's gonna say, now I need these other materials so you can bring them to that guy so you can go get this item and bring it back to me, and then I can build your sword for you, right? And you get a lot of this. And so when I'm playing these games, I feel personally offended because I loved Assassin's Creed. This was like my first action RPG that I absolutely fangirled over. I was like, I remember wanting to come home early, guys, from Hawaii. I was on a vacation in Hawaii, and all I could think about was,
relatable.
I have to get home so I can play Assassin's Creed. And I missed that. I missed that from the franchise. It's now like, oh my gosh, I'm dreading to open up this game, even though I'm like drawn in by Vikings in this world and being able to like travel through England and see the history. Like they still do really well at that, but then just the daunting and the reality hit of, oh my gosh, this is what the gameplay is like. Fetch quests, more fetch quests, so I can just level up and not get killed by, you know, the guys pursuing me in this game to kill me, the Templars. So that for me is the most offensive recently.
Yeah, I could certainly relate to that. I think Black Flag, if I remember right, didn't have quite as many fetch quests. Like that game, I remember.
That's the last.
I think that
good
was the
one.
first. Yeah, that was the first Assassin's Creed game I played, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. The story didn't really compel me as much with the modern and old, because I didn't know anything about the prior series. But from a game design standpoint, character standpoint, world standpoint of the past, the historical element of it, like that world, I really enjoyed. Yeah. I just wasn't really in on the sci-fi element.
These kind of quests really make it easy to not finish the game, to leave them unfinished. So that leads me to my question for you. Have you ever started a side quest and left it unfinished, not just for like how it is, like a fetch quest, but for the brutality or difficulty spike?
Yes. So I was playing Oblivion, and I was kind of taking that approach that I mentioned that I've been doing on Starfield, where I was going like, I wonder if I could just clear off some of these side quests. And Mo was watching me, and I was like, we found the Forlorn Watchman is like this ghost looking at a lake and following him, and then he eventually goes in a boat and got murdered by wraiths, like absolutely comically destroyed. And those kinds of difficulty spikes are so frustrating because you're brought in through a narrative design element of this Forlorn Watchman. You're like, man, that's so cool. And then all of a sudden it becomes a grind. It's like, oh no, you got to go level up and figure out how to fight wraiths and figure out like what kind of potions are you going to bring. And it like rips you out of the story and sends you back onto the overworld map of like, all right, go find some dungeons, go barter, go make more money, and then come back when you're ready. That was frustrating because I just wanted a cool, haunting, chilling story. If you know me, you know I'm obsessed with lonely guys in a lake town where there's something amiss, whether you know he's got a hidden past or whether he's an author writing in a cabin by the lake. So I was like, this is right up my alley. And then I walk into that boat and get jumped by a bunch of wraiths. Didn't appreciate that. And I do want to say there was one fetch quest where I just had to stop. There was like a colony ship that I was helping out and negotiating and doing all this kind of like Obsidian style, Outer World style kind of, okay, what if I give you this? And what if she says this? And what if she does that? And then, you know, you're kind of negotiating and playing the peacekeeper. And then it ends with, go get these materials, like 20 of these, 20 of these, 20 of those. And you're like, all right, well, I'm not going to like actively try to do that. I'm just going to go around the world, collect shit. And if I eventually have it, I'll go collect the completed quest reward. So I think that kind of thing ruins it for me. And then I've said this many times on the show, but Nuka World, oh my God, difficulty spikes and fetch quests. And it's really, really frustrating because the DLC is like 20 to 30 hours long and you get to the end and it's like the most fetch questy, most difficulty spike ridden final quest possible. And there's like two options. One is either do the fetch quest or do the insane combat challenge. And so that was frustrating.
With that, I'm thinking like, guys, do you even want me to play your game? You're making it so difficult for me to stay immersed in it. This is what rips you out of the immersion of the game.
Right. So let's get some vocabulary of quest design and level design down. And we're going to use Will Shen, formerly of Bethesda. He's famous for being the Starfield guy, for being the Fallout 4's DLC Far Harbor guy, and a Skyrim guy. So like really well respected. And he did a GDC talk recently where he was explaining how basically the growth from Skyrim all the way up to Starfield and how all of these developers now exist and kind of like how these teams work. So you have like quest design, which does dialogue, text, voiceover, quest scripting, AI behavior, and systems design. And then you have level design, which they do locations, kit logic, AI behavior, combat encounters, environmental storytelling, gameplay scripting. And so these two teams work together, and in collaboration, the level design team ends up doing the location, combat, NPCs, layout decisions, and then the quest design people do the narrative, non-combat NPCs, and story decisions. And so together they do that, and I think that this helps explain why some side quests are really robust and like have these really interesting non-combat NPCs that you're talking to. I think of like The Witcher 3, you know, like you're negotiating with them, you're finding more story, more characters, how they relate, and then you have your combat NPCs, which can be really frustrating, where it's like it's just a tanky character that like runs out, and like, oh cool, the side quest is figuring out how much I can grind to try and beat this character, you know? And so also, you know, they mentioned layout decisions. So it's like, how does the haunted mansion in Skyrim, how does it look? What are the notes that are on the table? What kind of candles are we placing there? And so when it's working well, you get a really great product from all of these people creating one great quest that could end up being a side quest. So we had that vocabulary in mind now.
So moving on, let's now talk about 1, why players play side quests, and 2, how developers reward players for completing the side quests. And with those 2 points, I think we will get a bit closer to understanding the art of great side quest design.
Yeah, so I think BioWare is like the model for a lot of great RPGs, right? They did Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, I believe. They did Mass Effect. Veterans from Dragon Age Origins. But veterans of BioWare ended up doing one of my favorite RPGs, which is Banner Saga. They also did KOTOR. So when I was playing Mass Effect 1, I was playing their side quest, getting a feel for it. You mentioned that Mass Effect had a big impact on how you think about side quests. So what do you think is some of those, like that magic that they have in their side quests? Like what makes it work according to you?
So what really makes Mass Effect work in terms of their side quests is it's actually kind of similar for me in terms of when I think about the faction side quests in Skyrim, when I even think about the character side quests, like with like either Yennefer or Triss in The Witcher 3. I think Mass Effect does really well at helping you fall in love with their characters more through the side quests. And so like you could be doing their mission, you can have potential romance options with them, you can potentially not even get some of these characters on your team because you're just choosing the wrong narrative choices. And so that's really interesting to see what these characters care about. It's just like reading a book. Like when we fall in love with a character in a book, it's because we resonate with what they care about and what they don't care about.
No, I think you're right about the cast, you know, because earlier when we were texting you, one thing you were harping on was the voice acting. And I was thinking about that and I was like, okay, we're an RPG podcast. Does that mean that every side quest should have voice acting, or is that like a modern open world action game expectation? And I think with us being primarily like a Bethesda channel, I think that yeah, I do think voice acting is kind of expected in a side quest. And if there isn't voice acting, it would be kind of unusual. And so I think the reason why people love BioWare and they love CD Projekt Red and they love Larian Studios is because of the voice acting. Like the little bits that I've played of Divinity Original Sin 1 and Divinity Original Sin 2 is like, man, these voice actors are amazing. Like these characters are so well fleshed out. So I've played The Witcher 3, I've beaten it, and it's been like now, I think 4 years. And so I don't know as much about Cyberpunk 2077. I'm curious, like it's been a minute since I played Witcher 3, so I don't quite remember, but has CD Projekt Red figured out any unique ways or maybe ways that you just like and think work to reward players for doing the side quests? Like, do you feel rewarded when you do extra work in Cyberpunk 2077?
Totally, because there's rewards. I mean, basically always experience, but what's really great about how CD Projekt Red handles their side quests is you run into them and you have an opportunity to choose, hey, am I going to stick around and see these two characters hash it out and then I got to go talk to one and continue down that side quest, or am I just going to blow right past them for the main mission? And they do such a good job at making these scripted moments, queuing the side quest so interesting. And so you find yourself doing your main mission, then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this crazy moment where this gang came in and started shooting up another game right in front of me just happened. And now I'm in the middle of this fight, and I gotta choose who I'm helping, and then I have an opportunity to collect more loot, and I might find a really sick weapon from there that's actually gonna help me with the main quest. And so I think that's the best way I can explain how, and the reason why I absolutely love how CD Projekt Red handles their rewards and their side quests.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, and this is why I'm glad we have the vocabulary in front of us, because the scripting is something I didn't anticipate until I was listening to Will Shen explain how they build quests, because it's like, yeah, that's what CD Projekt Red does so well. Just a little bit of Cyberpunk I've played, Mo and I were like watching in awe of like, wow, this game feels like you're walking inside of a movie, and yet you still have agency. And I think that that's what I expected a little bit more from Starfield's main storyline, is like, up the production value of those scripted moments. Like, make it so that way when we play the main quest, we all are walking away going, man, that was sick. But when I think of like scripting in a Bethesda game, I think of like the characters like walking really stiffly over to the room and then like opening the door, disappearing slowly, and then you walk in the door, and then they like walk in position, and then they start talking, and you're like not that impressed with the scripting of the whole, you know, moment to moment story unraveling. But when you play a Larian Studios or a CD Projekt Red, you're more bought into the production value of those story moments, and that in itself seems to be the reward with companies like CD Projekt Red. Where I think the reward for Bethesda is like, you get into this cool battle and you're using all this gear that you found, and you're figuring out a way. It's a little bit more like, it's a little bit more free thought of like, oh, I'm going to do it this way, and then I'm going to do it this way, or I'm going to do something ridiculous right now. You know, I'm going to use this potion, or I'm going to use this crazy grenade I made. That's where the creative moments come from, less so from watching those creative moments unfold, and more so of like, here's a sandbox, the AI is going to do what the AI does, and you're going to have a totally unique experience inside of that. But let's talk about when it clicks. So if a side quest clicks for players, it probably does a few things right. So 1, compelling quest narrative with strong character development, so your BioWares. 2, diving deeper into the main quest themes. And this is something that I have been thinking about as I've been watching Emil Pagliarlo from Bethesda talking about how like central themes is something he focuses on. So with like Fallout 4, he was like, the central theme is like human versus android, and this concept of suspicion. Like, are you a human or you're an android? He was like, with Skyrim, the central theme was you're this messiah. Like, there's this very religious kind of, you're the dragonborn, you are the messiah, which a lot of people criticize, you know, Skyrim for. And so then I was thinking about, and he was like saying how like, you know, you want to support your themes throughout the game. And I do think that's true. And so going back to when it clicks is like diving deeper into the main quest theme. So like, does the side quest support, like maybe it shows you a main theme from a different angle? You know, JRPGs are really good at this, you know, Unicorn Overlord, Final Fantasy VII. It's like you go down to the street level and you see how someone's being affected by the main theme of the story. And then number 3 is motivating players to explore the world further, creating a richer sense of immersion. And this to me is like when you have a good location and level design, when you have good layout decisions, as they call it, when they have good story decisions, like good combat encounters, environmental storytelling, something that brings the world more to life.
I'm thinking
through,
about
like, show
Baldur's
me, don't tell
Gate
me.
3, like especially Baldur's Gate 3. The side quests there, you know, definitely motivate you to explore the map, and you can just see the love and the level design, like you said. Yeah.
So that brings me to my next question. Which RPGs do you think best exemplify this feeling of all of the complex quest design pieces are working together to produce a strong experience?
Gosh, I kind of jumped the gun with that one. I think Baldur's Gate 3.
Maybe you answered it already. Baldur's Gate 3.
Baldur's
It's as
Gate
simple
3.
as that.
I love. I mean, let's start with number one: compelling quest narrative. Totally, 100%. You know, we got these little bugs in our head, and we're gonna die unless we get them out. Like, okay, here we go. Already compelling narrative. Some of this like Attack on Titan, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die kind of thing, right? Always love that in a game. And then diving deeper into the main quest themes. You know, the Baldur's Gate 3 for me is about complex characters and moral choices with them, and just to have variety of consequences. And so just to be just that their side quests are just piggyback on all of those moral choices that you are going to be facing in the main quest, and they do a great job at preparing you to be able to handle the more difficult main quest decisions. And then 3, I totally already mentioned with, you know, how the level design and just the way the map is laid out, and how they force you to move around the map with combat and characters and your skill checks. You're just forced to explore the world further than normal and level up your character, because if you don't do all these side quests I found in Baldur's Gate 3, you're not gonna have such an easy time with the main quest. You're gonna be kind of under leveled and not have all the skills you want. So yeah, it's just Baldur's Gate 3. You gotta play that game with me, Spencer. We still gotta play that game.
Dude, yes, absolutely. I was telling you that I may be interviewing some CRPG developers soon, so I'm going to kind of grill them on how does an action adventure open world player enter into the world of CRPG and understand the expectations of how to quest, how to solve problems, how to think differently, because it's like it's a different mindset that I was so overwhelmed with Divinity Original Sin 2. It's like I made it far and further and further and further, and then I just hit that difficulty spike where like all of a sudden there was like these skeleton dudes. I was like, I need to start over. I feel like what you're exactly describing. I did not do enough side quests. I'm not leveled up enough. I have no idea how I'm supposed to take on 20 skeletons that I've never seen before. Like, what on earth is happening? But we have a cool anecdote from Reddit. So do you want to go ahead and read this for us? Because I think that Reddit really nailed down kind of what makes a good quest design, like the fundamentals of quest design.
Yes, and this, oh my gosh, I'm already seeing what, right, we're talking about narrative, and this is actually exactly what I originally said when we talked about the idea for this video. What stands out to me is totally 100% narrative. Love this. Okay, I'm going to read it. It seems that a huge portion of what most people get out of quests is the narrative content, and it seems to apply the way that people in the industry approach it as well. Another good name for it would be the context or the premise. Basically, you're probably going to be doing the same stuff for almost every quest. Walk, talk, and combat in different amounts. So the narrative aspect of quests factors in immensely to whether people remember a quest fondly or not. As a rule of thumb, as long as the other elements of the quest aren't frustrating, immense grinding, unclear instructions, or whatever else, this is what most of the people I have asked end up remembering as the most important part. Yeah, so that's really
isn't that like sick?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's from Thalefeather on Reddit. So yeah, that was a really insightful. Yeah, it was really insightful for me. And yeah, I was just thinking, like, there's nothing worse than going the extra mile for a game only to be betrayed by a side quest demanding that you spend hours with, as he said, or they said, or she said, immense grinding, unclear instructions, or whatever else. So as gamers, we want to be rewarded for completing side quests.
Yeah, I love that quote. But let's now talk about how, as gamers, we want to be rewarded for completing side quests, right? So first, more quests should mean more satisfying adventures, compelling locations to explore, and better loot. Everyone loves a good magical sword, especially me. Side quests should also introduce more story and more time with the characters that we love. This is what I was saying about Mass Effect, right? Side quests should also give the player the option to gain more power, reasonable opportunities to grind, and the option to reduce the gameplay challenge of the main quest.
Right, like it's a balance of feeling like you're outsmarting. It's like you're waiting in line at a ride, and you're like, wait. If we just hop out of the line for a second, we can take this little detour, and somehow it's going to make the ride more fun and more compelling. So it's like maybe it's like, this trick of like, oh, they sell churros right by the Haunted Mansion. So if we, like, everyone's waiting in line right now, but if we go get churros, we'll eat the churros, the line is going to die down because the fireworks are going to happen, and then we'll be able to go straight into Haunted Mansion. It's like, that is how I think grinding should work in a game, is that you feel like you're the smarter player for doing the grind, as opposed to you're the less talented player who has to do the grind. Totally. And so I think that really thin distinction line matters. And so when we're talking about quest design, I think a lot of the conversation has been about how these large teams, they end up just padding stuff, or they end up doing the things we don't like because they've gotten so big, and that there is so many people working on one quest that no one person knows what's happening. And so back in the day, around the time of Skyrim, Bruce Nesmith of the quest design team, he was telling a podcaster, Kiwi Talk, that, quote, when I was a manager at Bethesda, one of the things I said frequently and very much believed is it took at least a year for anyone on the design team to be able to do quality work without assistance. Doesn't mean they couldn't do quality work, but they would need help. Hey, how to like this? What's going on over here? You need at least a year to master the tools and be able to do things independently. So I think that there does need to be that element of ownership for a developer to make sure that it's fun. Like, to make sure, one thing that Bethesda says is great games are played, not made. So it's like, you have to play the game. You have to know what the psychology of the player is going through as they're experiencing your quest. And when something becomes bloated, kind of like what you were alluding to your experience with like the later Assassin's Creed games, is that it feels like no one played this game. With the Nuka World, right. I'm like, did anyone play this? Do you guys think this is fun? So I think that is one element that maybe players are laying at the feet of bad quest design, which is like, it used to be one or two people kind of directing a quest and bringing that together.
So always a factor, Spencer, when making games: time, deadlines. We love them. So here's what I got for you. This seems to imply that in order for an RPG of Skyrim scale to succeed, the development team requires time to get comfortable with the tool set. And once they've had that experience, they're able to create compelling work alone.
Right. So there was a really cool anecdote in, I believe it was Jonah Loeb's YouTube video about Skyrim and the developers remembering their time with it. And there was an example of Blackreach being made by two people, Joel Burgess and it was Nate Perky. So together, those two guys built out Blackreach, which is like its own environment. It has the mushrooms, it has the cool lighting, and they have multiple quests feeding through that. So they call it like a first pass through and a half, and then the rest of the team came around and supported them. So what's interesting is Joel Burgess was the first level designer hired by Bethesda, and in order to prove the value of good level design, he made Maroon's Razor DLC for Oblivion, which made over 6 figures in DLC sales. And his point was that players at the time were kind of mad because there's only a couple megs of download. But he's like, no, that's efficiency. We efficiently made content, new content with existing tools, told a new story. And so his whole point was like, a small team of good level designers can create really compelling quests. And so I think that, of course, applies to side quest design. And
you need more of that mindset, dude, where you were saying the efficiency of not having a lot of gigs to download for the game. Like, gosh, how many games have we downloaded now that are over 100 gigs now? I hate it. So and then they still don't work right and they're all buggy. So I love that point. We need more of that.
Yes. So final thought, shout out to Dylan, because he's been talking to you about Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Yes.
And so I just want to like give a little bit of the insight. He was texting us as we were writing the script, which is that he said there's a feeling of wanting to help random people when you play. So lots of fetch quests, but some quests do require certain skills or abilities to obtain said quest items. So he said, for example, you could get this job from a character right outside of Rete, and he asks you to steal an expensive book. But in order to complete the quest, you need to be an expert level 15 in lockpicking. And another example is this butcher needs deer innards for this lady who wants a certain type of soup. So after hunting for about 2 hours, killing every deer I came across, I was only able to obtain meat, sometimes antlers if I was lucky. I had to do some research and found out that you need to have a certain level to harvest innards from animals. So that can either be really frustrating or really satisfying depending on your skill level and your desire to be immersed. Because that reminds me a lot of Starfield. It's like, oh, in order to do this, you need this skill and you need this. And it's kind of like a tutorialization feature where it's like, hey, let's do a side quest to explain to people why they should develop this skill set. So then he was comparing it to other open world games. What I'd like to do while playing the main quest is talk to quest activity givers while on the way to do a main quest part. I call it quest scumming because after I allegedly beat the main quest, I'll go back and attempt to do all the side quests. So yeah, like when you do side quests is interesting too. So yeah, there's just like a little bit of thoughts from Dylan, who listens to Tactically Sound and is in the JumbyJumbwa camp. So tell us your guys' thoughts and what games stand out to you from a side quest, narrative design, quest design, level design standpoint. But if you guys want to connect with JumbyJumbwa, Matt, where can they find JumbyJumbwa?
You can find me on Instagram or YouTube at JumbyJumbwa, JumbyJumbwa. I'll see you guys over there.
And yeah, you're already subscribed to the Yetti Den, or you're already watching the Yetti Den, so please subscribe and you'll get more Tactically Sound from me and Matt talking about all things RPGs. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching this episode on Side Quests. Later. Bye.
Peace.
Yeah.